High School DxD Trails of Oroboros, What if Issei got the power of a divine knight? Part 2. Issei was nervous. Today was the day of his final date with Yuma. Drake and Rose were both adamant that he should keep behaving like normal outside of his house until the date. Rose commented during his training that if he was scouted for his gear, he was probably being watched. He had to be sure to only train in his gear so DxD could control his aura so he wouldn't be detected. That strange masked man bought him 3 free extra days worth of training in the week he had left until his date when he first learned of his upcoming potential death. Rose and DxD had made sure every available moment he had, he was pulled into the gear and trained like Rocky on crack. After the first day, despite it being only in his mind, he felt as if his body would fall apart from the training. And when he wasn't in the gear, DxD spoke in his mind, training him to remember the names of spells and enchantments. And the night before, DxD was able to summon through Issei, one of his old dragon scales. When he was slain, DxD explained that he and Albion's souls were put into their gears while their bodies were used to make gear and weapons for the factions, and Rose taught Issei a spell using his, or in this case DxD's aura, to summon from far away something with the same DNA or aura. The spell was mostly used to travel to family, or give a strand of hair to an item to summon it whenever you wanted. DxD had Issei use it to summon one of these pieces of equipment. "So this equipment will help me take down Yuma?" Issei asked, looking at the pair of ironically gauntlets that appeared when he cast the spell. The gauntlets looked very similar to the boosted gear, but with no green gem in them. They also had what looked to be chain mail coming out the back of the gloves. However, the chainmail was made out of pure scales linked together. "Now pick up the left gauntlet and undo the links holding one of the scales together," commanded DxD. Issei did as he asked. It took him some time with his dad's old tools he snuck into his bedroom. Finally, after an hour, he got one loose. "Shouldn't these be a lot bigger? I mean, I've seen yours in the Mindscape, and they could be shields by themselves. When they were extracted from my body, they used magic to condense them and make them smaller. This has the full amount of aura one of my large scales would have," DxD explained. "So what am I supposed to do with this?" Issei asked, now holding the red scale about the size of a 50-cent piece. "Now you eat it," DxD said flatly. Issei stared at the scale blankly for a few seconds before shouting, "What?" DxD chuckled. "This is a final step to properly ensure you can use my Dragon Slayer magic." Remembering that moment made Issei hold his stomach and shiver as he made his way to meet up with Yuma. He texted her if she wanted to go on a quicker, shorter date with a simple movie and walk in the park. She almost instantly responded yes. She also asked if there was a reason he wasn't responding to her texts as often. Issei came up with a cover for his training and discomfort at talking with someone who wants to kill him by saying he was helping plan a party with his friends for one of their sibling, which was a lie, considering both his friends were only childs. Issei was anxious about confronting her. Until Joker talked to him and DxD used his magic to confirm that she was a fallen, Issei truly was falling for her. On their dates and through their texts, it truly felt like they were forming a connection. To know it possibly was all fake was torture. Sitting through the movie was also torture. Yuma wanted to see a horror film. Normally, Issei would love this, hoping for some frightened moments of her clinging to him in the movie. But all he could think was, is she really going to try and kill me? After the film ended, they made their way to the park. For a while, they walked in silence. Finally, as they approached the middle of the park as the sun began to set, Yuma asked, "Is something wrong, Issei?" Issei stopped walking, and with his head down and eyes shielded by his hair, he finally confronted her. "Does the name Raynare mean anything to you?" She froze in shock. "Where have you heard that name?" She took a step back with a hand to her mouth. "So it's true then." Issei said sadly, "That's your real name, which means you really did plan on killing me tonight." Issei summoned his sacred gear on his left hand. Surprisingly, Raynare didn't look mad, but sad. Her head was cast down as she addressed the accusations. "Yes, my real name is Raynare." Light formed around Yuma. Her clothes disappeared as a highly revealing black leather outfit took its place. She seemed to grow a few inches taller, and her assets grew bigger. Her face seemed to go from a cute and innocent look to mature and refined. Black feathered wings emerged from her back as she floated a few inches of the ground. She looked at the boosted gear on his arm, then to the scrunchie he got her that she still had on her wrist from their first date. When I first saw you, you looked like some simple prey I could easily get a gear from. However, while I was going on dates with you trying to get a feel for what your gear was, I never expected to actually enjoy myself. She said this all while still staring at her scrunchie. Issei wasn't expecting this. She was really a fallen, but here she was, making seemingly no moves to hurt him. Issei slightly lowered his aggressive stance. Raynare looked into Issei's eyes. I'm sorry, Issei. I used you for your gear, and unfortunately, the process of extraction will kill you. If I could just take it and leave you be, I now would. She raised her hand, and a spear of purple light like that, which comes out of a black light. I need your gear if I'm ever to rise the ranks. I must prove myself to him. I've spent far too long trying to redeem myself. I'm trying to earn my keep. I'm trying to get any acknowledgement. She was starting to feel unhinged. Issei took his stance. I am truly sorry, Issei. I wish there could have been any other way. She launched her spear right for his chest, trying for a quick and painless kill. Issei put his new training to the test, Issei thought to himself. Accelerate! Quick casting his spell, Issei disappeared from where he was standing a moment before. Raynare stared in confusion to the spot he was standing before, where now only had her spear stabbed in the tree behind it. Fire Dragon! Came a shout from behind Raynare. Just as he turned, she couldn't move fast enough. Meteor Fist! An impact of a fist covered in magical flame crashed into her face, launching her back into the ground. Issei stood where Raynare was before. Raynare forced herself back to her feet, looking at Issei in shock. She couldn't believe how fast he moved, that he could use magic, and that he could actually bring himself to hit her. Then Raynare saw his face. Issei was crying. He had a look of pure anguish on his face. You can use magic? Raynare said in surprise. Had to defend myself from a murderer, Issei whispered almost to himself. This statement from its tone stabbed at Raynare's heart. She pushed it down, thinking of the goal she is so close to finally achieving. Don't think because you know a few spells you can stop me. Raynare states, her voice tight. I have done everything for Azazel. He never gave me the time of day. After thousands of years, all my efforts to prove myself, to get stronger, he still acts like I'm just some NPC in his life. With the power of gears, I'll finally be noticed. Azazel. Issei thinks he remembered Drake saying something about that being the name of the current leader of the Fallen. So, not only were you planning to kill me, I wasn't even really on your radar. Issei chuckled to himself. It was a laugh of sadness, not joy. There was a new fire in Issei's eyes. Raynare could see a strong aura start to grow around Issei. It was at this moment that Issei called out the right Welsh gauntlet for his right hand. Requip. Now battle ready, there was a sound that caused Raynare to actually feel a little fear from Issei.
Boost.
A green flash comes from where Issei was standing, not wanting him to get a chance to use his power again. Raynare summoned 2 more light spears and charged Issei. She swung her spears, aiming for his legs, hoping to pin him to the ground, but it was too late. Issei has already moved. What she swung at turned out to be an after image. Issei was above her gauntlet, pulled back, crashing down on top of Raynare. Once again, Raynare hears him shout, Fire Dragon Meteor Fist! As he slams on top of her, transferring his boost into his flaming fist, causing an explosion resulting in a small crater where Raynare was standing. After the dust settled, Raynare lay unconscious below him, covered in small burns where he hit her. The voice of Drake spoke up. You did well, hatchling. What will you do with her now? I'm not sure. Guess I'm still processing everything. Issei huffed, still short of breath. You better move quickly, hatchling. With all the power you two released, it would be sure to attract the devils that Infinity Spawn mentioned. Right, Issei said quietly, as he continued staring at Raynare's unconscious face as he wiped his tears from his eyes. Issei actually hoped that the demons would sense him. If what Joker said was true, and he lived in an area considered demon territory, then logic would say they would have something like cops to detain or deal with intruders. Issei crouched down after putting away his gear and gauntlet. Holding his hand over Raynare, he cast a sleeping, paralyzing, and binding spell on her. Issei lifted Raynare over his shoulder and turned in the direction of the old abandoned church Joker mentioned. Accelerate, Issei said as he cast another spell. Flashback. During training in the gear mindscape. Rose was in the middle of raking Issei over the coals, having him write down spell symbol and phrases over and over, barking at him each time he messed up a spell pattern. How the hell is anyone supposed to cast a damn thing if all the incantations take so damn long? Issei yelled. Rose, faster than a blink of an eye, placed a hand on the back of Issei's head and slammed him into his desk. Shut up and deal with it, she said bluntly as she issued her discipline. Each race has had their own means of invoking magic. The Norris could invoke magic with just a single symbol. However, it gave them limited use and uncontrolled results, while witches of medieval used long incantations leading to better complex results. The power of magic is just the drawing of raw power of the gap into our world and shaping it into energy or matter to fit our need of it. The history of magic is just many a people spending years trying to learn how to gain and use it. That is why there are so many forms and ways to do so. The gap? Issei questioned. What, Drake not explained to you about dimensions? Rose said dryly, as if disappointed in him for not doing so. Drake gave an annoyed sigh to that statement. We don't exactly have a whole lot of time. We only have about 2.5 days till he will have to use what we can teach him just to defend himself. I figured all that could wait until the threat was out of the way. While Rose continued to argue about the lack of teaching being done other than just magic spells, Issei thought about Rose's earlier words about different kinds of magic. Issei went back to a chapter in one of the textbooks conjured out of memories of all the user's knowledge. He looked at a section about how runes invoke power from a word by a symbol, then to an incantation of power by fairies by delayed spells that are activated by triggers. This gave Issei an idea. Issei interrupted their argument. Can you invoke spells on spells? Issei asked. Rose turned to him, confused. What do you mean? Issei showed her his idea. He figured by invoking a spell on something with an empty trap ruin normally used to store elemental spells in Norris magic, instead trapping a long incantation that would have more difficult incantation into said trap ruin, and then tie a fairy trigger word to activate the trap to invoke the stored spell. This way, even with more difficult spells, he could reduce the casting time by just saying one word. Rose's eye opened up wider in surprise at Issei's cleverness. With so few days, even learning magic was real. Rose smiled. Well done, kid, that's a great idea. You really got potential. A scary aura surrounded her, giving the vibe of the abusive pet owner that found out its new pet could do a trick. Issei shrunk in his conjured desk chair in fear. This training was now going to get more extreme. End flashback. Issei was now standing in front of an old abandoned church on the north side of town. Drake spoke from his left hand as Issei summoned his gear and adjusted Raynare on his shoulder. I can sense about 3 more fallen angels inside, and about 30 lower auras, probably human rogue priests. I can also sense a demon on location where you fought with your ex, Drake said calmly. Issei looked up to the ornate stained glass circle above the large doors to the old cathedral. Then I believe we should hurry. Issei clenched his fist and walked up to the door abruptly, kicking it in with a boosted fire dragon talon. The doors flew off their hinges and crashed on top of a few stray priests. Inside, most of the pews were missing, save the 2 closer to them against the wall. On the altar, instead of a pulpit, sat a large iron Gothic-style cross. Around the cross was a large spell circle drawn on the floor in blood. From this distance, Issei could see it was some kind of extraction spell. Above the cross floated the remaining 3 fallen, looking at him in surprise. There were 2 females and 1 male. The male looked like a guy in his late 40s or in the early 50s in a brown duster and fedora. The next fallen looked to be a woman in her 30s, with long navy blue hair and a maroon suit. And the last was a short girl, looking about 15 with blonde pigtails in a gothic Lolita outfit. Then Issei saw her. The girl Joker mentioned. The kidnapped nun. The girl looked to be 15 with long blonde hair cascading down to her lower back. She had been stripped of her robes and wore only a thin ripped nightgown. They had her strung up and crucified, held up by chains around her arms and waist. Issei's eyes lit in fury. The gear on his arm instantly boosted from the rise of his anger. There was a glowing light hovering in front of her heart. Issei knew what this meant. They had already performed the spell. He was too late. The male fallen addressed him. "Who in the world are you? How dare you disturb our ceremony?" He took a full look at Issei and noticed what he was carrying. "What the—" He trailed off only to be interrupted by the navy-haired fallen. "Is that Raynare?" Issei calmly walked to the pew to his right and placed Raynare down carefully. He still wasn't sure why he was careful not to hurt her any more than he had, but he would worry about it later. He faced the fallen, a deadly look in his eyes. The lolly fallen started bitching. "How dare you lay your filthy hand on her? What did you—" Before she could continue, Issei whispered, "Accelerate," and appeared suddenly beside her with a flaming fist in her gut. "Fire Dragon Meteor Fist," Issei said in a cold, detached tone in her ear. With a small, controlled explosion, the lolly was blown back so hard she crashed through the wall behind the pulpit, leading to moonlight shining through the newly created girl-sized hole in the wall. The two remaining stared in shock at his sudden movement. To them, clearly, he had massive strength. However, Issei was already straining from the effort. He expended a lot of effort against Raynare already, and his spells and gear boosted what he had, but that also came with a backlash of fast-drained stamina. Luckily for him, he was fueled by rage from all the events of the day, keeping him up and moving. "You bastard!" the navy-haired girl yelled as she charged him with light spears in each hand. She dived down in his place of landing from his earlier attack. He looked directly at her and conjured a spell circle in front of his face. And in an instant, "Fire Dragon Roar!" With a tremendous bellow of sound, the roar of a dragon escaped his lungs and collided with the spell circle, converting the ear-shattering noise into pure crimson flame. The widespread flame shot out and up into the direction of the navy-haired fallen. The heat of the roaring flame singed the skin of all the rogue priests. The sound shook the whole cathedral like an earthquake. The flame engulfed the navy-haired fallen. The blast didn't just push her back, but blew a large hole out the roof of the church. When the flame died down, the remaining fallen woman that charged at him fell from her spot in the sky, now devoid of all clothes and hair, and covered from head to toe in second-degree burns. Issei dropped to one knee, the setbacks of all his use of stamina getting to him. Panting, Issei coughed. "Well, I overdid that one." The remaining fallen flew in front of Issei. All the priests behind him began to get up from being blown back from the force of his roar. The male fallen looked down on Issei with pure rage. "I don't know who you think you are, but it looks like you just spent your last bit of tricks getting this far." At that moment, the lolly flew, albeit crookedly, back through the hole she made in the wall, looking pissed. All the priests drew swords made of pure light. The fallen made spears of light in each hand. The male continued, "I see now allowing Raynare to go after you alone was a mistake. Luckily for us, with a gear like yours, we can achieve our goals, and you brought it right to our door." Issei caught a glimpse behind them and began to chuckle. The lolly got pissed and questioned him. "And what do you think you're laughing at? If you hadn't noticed, human, you're surrounded and out of juice." "If you hadn't noticed, unlike you, I'm not wearing an aura suppression band, and I just unleashed a boatload of power in the open." The two flinched at his words. "No matter," the male said. "We can take care of this before anyone gets here." He raised his spear but hesitated as Issei chuckled again. "Too late," Issei said, looking at the entrance of the cathedral. The fallen turned to see where Issei was looking. They froze in fear. Issei was actually surprised at what he saw, not from not expecting their arrival, considering how many breadcrumbs he left for them to get here, but from how they looked. Standing in the doorway was 4 teenagers. There was a little girl with jaw-length white hair, a tall boy with platinum blonde hair looking almost like a prince, holding a sword made of shadows, a tall, busty girl with dark purple hair that made it to her knees done up in a ponytail. Finally, there stood in Issei's opinion the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. The girl stood just a hair shorter than the ponytail girl. She had scarlet red hair cascading from her head, framing a beautiful face with the most piercing blue eyes he could even see from the pulpit. The girl with the red hair took in the scene. She gazed at everything from the fallen, the priests, the crucified girl, Issei, and even Raynare carefully bound and placed in her pew. She smiled and looked to Issei. Looks like someone decided to ruffle some feathers.